Okay, now we get to see the power of what we're using here in terms of our application, such as React and MobX, and centralizing our state and observing the state changes so that other parts of our application can update at the same time. Now, to demonstrate this, what we're going to do is make this follow button into its own component and put it in various locations in our application. So a single click of this button will update several parts, and we'll see it live on our browsers as this happens as well. So that's the goal, and we're going to make that following button a component. So let's open up the profile header first of all, and what we're going to be doing here is taking this reveal and putting it into its own component. And what we'll do, we'll just go to our Solution Explorer, and inside the Profiles folder we'll create a new file, and we'll call it follow button.tsx. And what we'll do is we'll just add all the elements we normally do. We'll say import React from React. And what we're also going to do is we're going to pass a profile into this component. So we'll add an interface called props, and we'll say profile of type profile. And then we'll export defaults, and we're going to connect this button to our store. So we're going to make it an observer. And then we'll add the function and say follow button. And we'll take or destructure our profile into this and make it a type of props. And then we'll just open up our component. And what we're going to return from this is that reveal that we just highlighted. So let's just cut this from our profile header component, and we're just going to paste it inside the return. And let's use the quick fix. And let's give this a go. Add all missing imports. And that's done the trick. So what we're also going to add into this component, we're going to get access to both our profile store and our user store. So we'll say const and then open up the square brackets or curly brackets and say profile store and user store, and we'll say equals use store. And just for convenience, we'll destructure a couple of the properties from the profile store. So inside here, what we're going to do is we're going to get the update following, and we're going to get the loading flag from our profile store. And the reason for bringing in the user store is that we do not want to display this button if we're on the user's own profile. So what we'll do is we'll check to see if the user store.user.username is equal to the profile.username, and if it is, then we're just going to return null so that we do not display the button when we're viewing our own profile. Now, where we're going to put this button, and let's just open up the profile card as well, because we're also going to add it here. What we're going to be doing is adding our button underneath our card content, but our card also acts as a link. And if we put a button inside our profile card, then what's going to happen is that the button's going to be clicked as well as the link activating, and it will take us to another location, and that's not the behavior that we want. So what we'll do is we'll prevent the default behavior of this button, which is going to activate the link at the same time, and we'll prevent that from happening. And the way that we can do that is we can use the prevent default method of the button. So what we'll do to handle that scenario is we'll add a function called handle follow. And this is going to take the event, which is of type synthetic events, and we'll take in our username that we want to follow as a string or unfollow. And then we can say prevent default, and we can check to see the profile to see if we're currently following this user's profile. And if we are, then we're going to say update following, and we'll pass in the username. And we've also got a flag as to what we want to set the following to. Are we following this user, or do we want to unfollow this user? Now, if we're following the user, we want to unfollow the user, so we'll set this flag to false. And otherwise, we're going to say update following, and we're going to pass in a username and set it to true. And then we can go and configure our buttons inside the reveal. So let's just move this stuff down. And for the content, we can update this now because we know the status of whether or not we're following this user. So we'll say profile following, add a ternary, and say following if we are, and not following if we are not. And then what we can do is update our other button, which is going to contain our functionality. Once again, we've got the information now so that we can actually do something to update the colors. If we're following the user currently, then the button's going to be red to unfollow, and green if we're about to follow. And same goes for the content here as well. So we'll add the same thing in there. So we've got a loading indicator, so if the button's going to be clicked, then we'll add the loading flag. And we'll add the onClick event as well, and we're going to pass the event, and then we'll say handle follow, and we'll pass the event and the profile.username. So what we can do now is go and add the button where we need to. So one of the places is going to be our profile header, and we're just going to replace what we had and add our follow button inside here. And we also need to pass the profile to the button itself, like so. And the other place that we're going to add this, so I'm just going to copy this into my clipboard, is in our profile card, and we're just going to add it below the card content. And we'll also use the quick fix to go ahead and bring in the follow button. So we should be able to go and test this functionality. So let's go take a look. We'll head back to our browser and we'll start where we currently are. Or in my case, I'm looking at Diana's profile, or what would be Jane if I hadn't changed the display name. So currently not following. If I click on follow, we see the spinner. The button changes to unfollow. The followers goes up to 1, and we can see that we're now following this particular user. That looks exactly how we want it to. If we go to our activities, and let's find another user, we can see the border around Jane. That is a little bit too subtle for my liking. So I'm just going to go back and change that in the activity list item attendee. Let's give it a slightly bigger border and just change the border width to 3, just so it's a bit more obvious. It's still pretty subtle, but we can see now that there's a difference between users we're following and users we're not following. So in this case, on future activity 1, I can see both Tom and Diana. I'm following these users, and we can also see the button appearing underneath their card there as well. So, and the number of followers. So we should be able to click the button from here, and this also updates the properties in there. And if we go and take a look at Tom's profile, then we can see that there's 1 follow. And if I'm on Tom and I click on follow, then the followers goes back up to 1, and if I unfollow, then it goes down to 0. That's what we're looking for. Tom's still got a following because he's following someone else. And if we go back to our activities and just do one more test, and let's go to Diana or Jane and unfollow. And when we go to Diana's profile, then we should see the followers and following back to 0. And we can follow again, and it goes up again. Perfect. So one more task to do, and that's to get a list of followers and followings to populate inside the user's profile as well. And we'll take a look at that next.